My name is Elena Vance, and I'm 38 years old. Last night, at a family dinner that was supposed to celebrate my greatest career achievement, my parents called me a burden. They saw me as nothing more than an unfeeling ATM, a means to fix their past mistakes, and they believed I was completely alone as they backed me into a corner. What they didn't know was that my real family, all 200 of them, were waiting right outside, ready to walk in and show them what true loyalty looks like. If you're watching this and have ever felt undervalued by the very people who should have championed you, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And before I tell you the story that changed everything, hit that like and subscribe button to hear more real-life stories about finding your strength in the most unexpected places. To understand the insanity of that dinner, you have to understand that in my family, I was always the rounding error. My parents, Robert and Margaret, were good people at their core, but they were trapped in an outdated worldview. They believed in tangible career paths, doctors, lawyers, or the owners of a small-town business. My brother David, 5 years my senior, was the vessel for all their hopes and dreams. He was the golden child destined to carry on a family business legacy. 20 years ago, my parents poured their life savings and took out a second mortgage to set David up with a high-end hardware store. It was a solid brick and mortar idea, something they could touch and be proud of. But David lacked the business acumen and, frankly, the work ethic. The store went bankrupt within 3 years, leaving my parents with a mountain of debt and shattered dreams. That failure created a financial and emotional black hole in our family, one that I was unknowingly tasked with filling. Meanwhile, I was the odd daughter, the one who preferred computers to people. From the time I was a teenager, I found solace in the logic and creativity of coding. I was entirely self-taught, spending my nights in our cold garage fueled by ramen noodles and big ideas. When I told my parents I wanted to start a software company, they looked at me as if I'd said I wanted to be an alchemist. "That's not a real job, Elena," my father said, his tone a mixture of pity and disappointment. "You need something stable." They refused to invest a single dollar in my hobby, which, after David's failure, I understood. But the lack of emotional support was what truly stung. During the first lean years of my company, Innovate Forward, they never once asked about my work with genuine curiosity. To them, it was just my little computer game. However, once the company started turning a profit, their tune changed. Disdain turned to expectation. The first call I got after landing my first major contract wasn't one of congratulations. It was from my father, stating flatly, "Elena, David's having a little trouble with his credit cards. Your mother and I were thinking you could help out." It was the first time, but it was far from the last. I paid off the debt. I paid for David's car repairs. I paid for vacations my parents said they deserved after all these hard years. I slowly became their retirement plan and my irresponsible brother's safety net. I remember one time, about 4 years ago, I was prepping for a massive presentation to investors that could completely change my company's trajectory. I'd been working without sleep for 2 weeks. The night before the pitch, my mother called panicked. She'd backed her car into a pole and needed me to drive 3 hours to come get her. When I hesitated explaining the monumental importance of the following morning, she delivered her classic line, "Family comes first, Elena." "Surely those little computer things aren't more important than your own mother," I went. I drove through the night, got 2 hours of sleep in an uncomfortable armchair, and my presentation the next day was a disaster. I lost the deal. When I told my mother, she just shrugged. "Oh, that's a shame." Well, there will be other chances. That injustice was the wallpaper of our relationship. My successes weren't mine. They were family assets. My sacrifices weren't acknowledged. They were expected. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the risks I took, or the incredible team I had built. They only saw the end result, the money. I accepted this role, telling myself it was the price of peace. I loved my family, and a part of me still craved the approval I never received. I thought I could keep living like that, balancing my two worlds. But I had no idea that a single piece of incredible news was about to shatter that fragile balance and force me to face the truth about who my family really was. My precarious equilibrium held for nearly a decade. I ran my company, which had grown from a one-woman garage operation into a thriving enterprise with 200 employees. Innovate Forward was a respected name in the tech industry, known for its creative work, culture, and cutting-edge products. In parallel, I played the part of the dutiful daughter, quietly propping up my family, paying their bills, and funding my brother's successive failed business ventures. It was a double life, and it was wearing me down. The catalyst that brought it all crashing down arrived as an email on a drizzly Tuesday morning. The subject line was just 4 words: Innovator of the Year Award. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked it open. It was the most prestigious award in our industry, a recognition not just of a product, but of vision and leadership. For months, I hadn't even known that my own board of directors had secretly submitted my name for consideration. The email informed me that I had been chosen. Along with the honor came a cash prize of $500,000. I sat staring at the screen, reading the words over and over. Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't tears of pure joy. It was a complicated, messy emotion, a mix of overwhelming pride and a cold, creeping dread. Part of me wanted to shout from the rooftops. This was validation for every sacrifice, every year of self-doubt and dismissal. But another part of me, the part conditioned by my family's dynamics, flinched. $500,000. The number echoed in my head like an alarm bell. To me, it meant expansion, well-deserved bonuses for my team, and investing in a community project I was passionate about. But I knew what it would mean to my family. The first person I called was Liam, my COO and my best friend. He'd been with me since the beginning, since the ramen noodle days in the garage. He understood better than anyone. "We did it, Al!" he yelled into the phone, his excitement pure and untainted. "I am so damn proud of you." "Me too," I said, but my voice wavered. "Liam, what am I going to do about my family?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. He knew exactly what I meant. "You don't owe them a dime of this, Elena. This is yours. It's ours. It's the company's." I knew he was right, but the guilt was so deeply ingrained. I decided I would tell them myself, control the narrative. I called my mother, keeping my tone bright and casual. "Mom, I have some amazing news." I told her about the award. Her initial reaction was a telling silence. "Oh," she said finally. "That's nice, dear. Is there prize money?" And there it was. Not "I'm so proud of you." Not "your hard work has finally paid off." Just a direct line to the money. I took a deep breath. "Yes, Mom. A significant amount." I could hear the immediate shift in her voice, a barely concealed excitement. "Robert, Elena got a big payday." I heard her yell to my father in the background. He was on the phone instantly. "Elena, that's fantastic. We have to celebrate. A real family dinner. You have to tell us all about it." His tone, the one he used when he wanted something, set my teeth on edge. "Of course, Dad. We can do that." "Excellent. How about this Saturday night at the Oak Room? Your mother will call David and invite your Aunt Carol and Uncle Frank. We'll make it a real family celebration." The Oak Room was the most expensive restaurant in town. Aunt Carol and Uncle Frank were our most judgmental relatives. The stage was being set. This wasn't a celebration for me. It was a performance designed to publicly stake their claim on my success. When I hung up the phone, the cold dread had completely eclipsed the initial joy. Liam was right. This wasn't going to be a party. It was going to be an ambush, and I was walking right into it unarmed. Or so I thought at the time. The days leading up to the Saturday dinner were a slow-motion nightmare. The air of feigned excitement from my family was almost unbearable. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts, each one a small probing needle testing my limits and making their true intentions crystal clear. The escalation began Wednesday morning. My father called me with what he referred to as his serious business voice. Elena, I've been thinking, he began, skipping any pleasantries. About your windfall. I've been talking with David and we've put together a family investment plan. One that will secure all of our futures. I was silent, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. What kind of plan, Dad? David has found a fantastic opportunity, he continued, his enthusiasm unnerving. A restaurant franchise. Low risk, high reward. With your prize money as the seed capital, we can set David up in a real business this time. It will pay off his debts, cover your mother's and my retirement, and there will even be a little left over for you. I was floored. They didn't just want a piece, they wanted the whole thing. They had already allocated my success, my career-defining award, to fund my brother's next inevitable failure without once consulting me. Dad, I said, trying to remain calm, that money isn't personal. It's for Innovate Forward. For reinvestment, for employee bonuses. He cut me off, his voice turning sharp. Don't be naive, Elena. Your employees have jobs. Family is what lasts forever. We sacrificed so much for you and your brother. It's time you returned the favor. He spoke of sacrifice as if raising children was a transaction, and I was now the dividend he was ready to cash in. The second incident occurred the next day. My mother called, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She had taken it upon herself to plan the dinner. Dear, I've invited a few more people. I hope you don't mind, she said cheerfully. The Millers and the Thompsons. I just want everyone to see how successful my daughter Island. The Millers and the Thompsons were my mother's longtime social rivals. I wasn't her daughter. I was a trophy, a weapon to be wielded in her never-ending war of status. Mom, I thought we agreed on just family, I protested. Don't be silly, Elena. This is a big deal. You must dress up. I told everyone you'd be making a major financial announcement at dinner. She was turning my celebration into a press conference for her own agenda. She was creating public pressure, backing me into a corner in front of an audience. But the cruelest blow came from David. He texted me Friday night, all pretense of subtlety gone. The message read, "Look, Elle. Mom and Dad are putting a lot of stock in this. Don't let them down. You owe this to us. After everything they lost on my store, this is your chance to make things right. If you're selfish with this money, it would be a shame if one of those tech bloggers found out the tragic story of how Innovate Forward CEO abandons her family in their time of need." It was an unmistakable threat. Blackmail. From my own brother. He was willing to smear me and my company to get what he wanted. I stared at the screen, a sick feeling rising in my stomach. The jealousy I had always sensed from him had curdled into something much more sinister. I tried to reason with them one last time. I initiated a conference call with all three of them, hoping for a final shred of sanity. I understand you're all excited, I began, my voice trembling slightly. But this award is a professional honor. It belongs to the company. I can't just hand it over. That's not how this works. A heavy silence followed. Finally, my father spoke, his voice ice. So this is who you are. After everything we've done, you choose strangers over your own blood. We'll discuss this on Saturday, Elena. In front of everyone, maybe a little peer pressure will help you remember where your loyalties belong. The call ended. I sat in the dark of my office, feeling utterly defeated. They wouldn't listen. They had twisted reality to fit their narrative, one where they were the victims and I was the selfish villain. The next morning, I went into the office, my heart heavy. Liam found me in the break room, staring into a cold cup of coffee. "How bad is it?" he asked softly. "The dam broke." I told him everything, my father's investment scheme, my mother's guest list, David's threat. I told him how cornered I felt, how manipulated, and how profoundly alone. Liam listened patiently. When I was done, he looked me straight in the eye. "Elena, they don't see you," he said, his voice firm with conviction. "They see a solution to their problems. You've built a family here. A family of 200 people who admire you, respect you, and would do anything for you. You are not alone in this." His words were like a searchlight cutting through the fog. He was right. The loyalty my parents demanded was a one-way street. But the loyalty I had built at Innovate Forward was real, forged in mutual respect. "What do I do, Liam?" I whispered. "I can't face them by myself." A slow smile spread across Liam's face, and for the first time in days I felt a flicker of hope. "Who said you'd be by yourself?" he said. "I have an idea. It's a little crazy, a little theatrical, but I think it's exactly what you need. Instead of letting them ambush you, why don't we turn the tables?" His remark planted a seed. A plan began to form in my mind, audacious and terrifying. It could destroy my relationship with my family for good, but it might also be the only way to reclaim my life. As I looked at Liam, I knew I wouldn't be walking into that battle alone. I had an army at my back, and that thought gave me strength I didn't know I had. The dinner at the Oak Room felt like a scene from a tragic play. The air was thick with expectation and fake smiles. I arrived alone, dressed in a simple but elegant dress, feeling like a gladiator in armor entering the lion's den. My parents were already there, greeting the guests my mother had invited: the Millers, the Thompsons, Aunt Carol, and Uncle Frank, all of whom looked at me with an undisguised predatory curiosity. My brother David stood beside my father, looking as smug as a prince about to be handed his kingdom. The meal was torture. The conversation was a performance of shallow praise directed at me, but it quickly veered into the family's financial hardships. My father recounted the story of David's failed hardware store, painting it as a noble tragedy instead of a failure of management. Aunt Carol sighed dramatically. "It must be such a burden for you to carry all that." All eyes turned to me as if I were the answer to all their prayers. They were setting a stage, and I was the unwilling star. I picked at my food, each bite feeling like ash in my mouth. I answered questions politely, maintaining a calm facade while a storm raged inside me. The last straw came with dessert. As the plates of chocolate lava cake were being served, my father stood tapping his wineglass for attention. The room fell silent. "We are here tonight," he began, his voice booming with false gravitas, "to celebrate my daughter Elena. Her success is our family's success." He paused, looking directly at me. "And as the head of this family, I believe that success should be used to strengthen our foundation." Then he did the unthinkable. He motioned to David, who produced a folder from his briefcase, and handed it to my father. My father placed it on the table in front of me, right next to my cake. "This is a document," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear that we had a lawyer friend of ours draw up. "It essentially establishes a family trust, managed by myself and David, to invest Elena's prize money wisely for the benefit of all of us." I stared at the papers. It was a legally binding contract, or at least it was designed to look like one. They had come prepared. They were going to pressure me to sign it right then and there in front of everyone. I shook my head slightly. "Dad, I already told you! I can't do that." A hush fell over the table. My father's smile vanished. "I don't think you understand, Elena. This isn't a request." It was then that my mother spoke, her voice trembling with calculated emotion. "Elena, after all, we've sacrificed the sleepless nights when you were a baby, the money we spent on your education, our support." "Support," I finally spoke, my voice low and clear. "You calls scorning my career and summoning me to fix your minor problems the night before, my most important presentation support." My mother looked stunned, as if I'd slapped her. My father bristled. "Don't you speak to your mother that way." "I'm not signing anything," I said flatly, pushing the folder away. And then my mother said the words that broke whatever was left inside me. She looked at me, her eyes cold and bitter, and in front of all their guests, she said, "We sacrificed everything for our golden boy David. And when he failed, we were the ones left holding the pieces. We thought you might finally be useful. But you are, after all, nothing but a selfish, ungrateful burden." Burden. The word hung in the air, venomous and permanent. It wasn't just an insult. It was the thesis statement for our entire relationship. All the checks I'd written, the events I'd missed, the support I'd given erased. In their eyes, I wasn't their solution. I was a disappointment, an underperforming asset. In that moment, a strange calm washed over me. No more pain, no more anger, just a cold, hard clarity. I looked around the table at the faces of my aunt and uncle, avoiding my gaze at David's smug smirk and at the self-righteous indignation on my parents' faces. I realized they would never change. They would never see me. They only saw what I could do for them. The fight I had been fighting for years to win their approval was over. Because you can't win a fight when your opponent doesn't even acknowledge your existence as a human being. I knew exactly what I had to do. I pushed my chair back and stood up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I need to make a phone call." As I walked out of the room, I could feel their eyes on me, utterly convinced that they had won, that I had broken under the pressure. They were dead wrong. I didn't walk to the restroom. I walked into the quiet, empty hallway of the restaurant, my heart beating a strong, steady rhythm. The emotional chaos inside me had settled, replaced by a sharp sense of purpose. I pulled out my phone. There was only one number I needed to call: Liam's. When we had mapped out our crazy contingency plan 2 days prior, it had felt hypothetical, a piece of dramatic theater we would likely never need. Now it was my only lifeline. "They did it, didn't they?" Liam answered on the first ring, his voice taut. He knew I wouldn't call unless things had gone nuclear. "Worse," I said, my voice even. "They called me a burden." "It's time, Liam. Set it in motion." "We're on our way," he said without a hint of hesitation. "We're 2 blocks out. Give us 5 minutes." "Can you hold on? I'll be fine," I replied. "Just get here." I hung up and took a deep breath. My secret weapon wasn't a document in a safe or a hidden recording. My secret weapon was my company culture. At Innovate Forward, we weren't just colleagues. We were a team. We had pulled all-nighters together, celebrated wins, and talked each other through failures. I knew the names of their children, their struggles, their dreams, and they knew mine. The loyalty my father demanded from me was based on obligation and blood. The loyalty I had fostered with my team was based on respect and shared experience. The plan was simple but audacious. After my call on Friday, Liam had sent out a company-wide email with the subject line, "Operations Support Our CEO." He'd explained the situation briefly without the sordid details, but making it clear I was facing a challenging family situation regarding my award. He proposed an idea: the company would have its own surprise celebration on Saturday night at an event space we rented just a few blocks from the Oak Room. The invitation read, "Come in your best business attire. This is optional, but we want to show Elena what she means to us." The real secret, the one my parents could never comprehend, was that in my world, loyalty isn't bought or demanded. It's earned, and I had spent a decade earning it. Liam had kept me updated on the response. Nearly the entire staff of 200 had RSVP'd within hours. They would be there. From senior programmers to the newest interns, they were ready to show their support. The second part of the plan was the dramatic part. On my signal, they would leave their party and march to the restaurant. They wouldn't be aggressive, wouldn't shout. They would simply enter an army of successful professionals and stand behind me. It would be an undeniable show of force, a visual refutation of my parents' narrative that I was a thankless loner. I had taken one other precaution. After David's threatening text, I had forwarded it to our corporate lawyer, Sarah. She confirmed it was textbook blackmail and had drafted a cease and desist letter. She also reviewed the type of trust agreement my father might present and advised me that it would be contestable in court due to clear duress, but that refusing to sign was paramount. Having that legal backing fortified my resolve. I wasn't just acting emotionally. I was acting with the support of professionals I trusted. 5 minutes. I had 5 minutes to go back to that table and face them alone, knowing that my cavalry was on its way. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the hallway. I saw a woman who looked tired but not defeated. For years, I had let their definition of me, the computer girl, the ATM, the burden, shape my sense of self-worth. But as I looked into my own eyes, I saw the CEO of Innovate Forward. A leader. A survivor. I straightened my dress, lifted my chin, and walked back into the dining room. As I entered, all conversation stopped. My parents looked at me triumphantly, believing I had returned to surrender. David smirked. "Have you had time to think, Elena?" my father asked, his voice dripping with condescension. I slid back into my chair calmly. "Yes," I said, my voice ringing out in the silence. "I've done a lot of thinking." I looked him directly in the eye, and the answer is still no. His condescension evaporated, replaced by rage. "After everything we discussed—" "No, Dad," I interrupted. "After everything you dictated. You talk about loyalty and family, but those are empty words when they only serve your agenda. You know nothing about my life, what I've built, or the people who have actually been there for me." As I spoke, I heard a low murmur from the front of the restaurant. A commotion. The manager looked flustered. It was starting. My heart began to beat faster, not with fear, but with anticipation. The show was about to begin, and my family had no idea they were no longer the stars. They were about to become the audience. "What are you talking about?" my father roared, his face crimson with fury at my public defiance. "The only people who have been there for you is this family." "Really?" I asked, my voice still unnervingly calm. Where was this family when I was sleeping on the garage floor because I couldn't afford rent? Where was this family when I cried myself to sleep after losing my first investor? Where has this family been for the last decade, except when it was time to have a check written? Silence fell over the table. My aunt and uncle stared at their plates. Even my mother's gossipy friends didn't know where to look. It was at that exact moment that the doors to the private dining room swung open. The restaurant manager entered, his expression a mixture of panic and apology. "Pardon me, Mr. and Mrs. Vance," he said, "but there's a group of people here to see Miss Vance." My father scowled. "We're in the middle of a private dinner. Tell them to leave." "I've tried, sir," the manager said, his voice strained. "They're very polite, but very insistent. And there are a lot of them." On his cue, Liam strode into the room. He was wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his demeanor calm and authoritative. He gave me a subtle, reassuring nod before turning to my parents. "Good evening," he said, his voice polite but edged with steel. "My name is Liam Chen, COO of Innovate Forward. I apologize for the interruption, but our team wanted to congratulate our CEO on her award in person." As he spoke, a stream of people began to file into the room. First 10, then 20, then 50. They were my employees. My engineers, designers, marketers, project managers, all dressed in their best business attire. They didn't say a word. They simply entered and formed neat, silent rows behind my chair, creating a living wall of quiet, professional solidarity. The large dining room suddenly felt small. Their presence filled the space not with noise, but with an unshakable sense of unity and purpose. I glanced around the table. The expressions on my family's faces were a priceless portrait of utter disbelief. My father's jaw was on the floor. My mother looked as though an army had just invaded her living room. David was white as a sheet, his smug smirk having completely vanished. Liam moved to stand beside me. "Elena, on behalf of everyone at Innovate Forward, we want to say how incredibly proud we are of you. Your vision and leadership have created not just a successful company, but a community. We are your family, and we have your back." I then rose to my feet, turning my back on my family and facing my team. Facing my real family. "Thank you, all of you," I said, my voice finally breaking with emotion, but it was the emotion of gratitude, not anguish. "This award isn't mine, it's ours. It belongs to every single person who believed in this idea when it was just a dream in a garage. And so I want to announce that the entire $500,000 prize will be going directly into our company's end-of-year bonus pool." A low but enthusiastic cheer erupted from my employees. Behind me, I heard my mother let out an audible gasp of horror. Finally, I turned back to face my stunned family. "You called me a burden," I said, my voice now strong and unwavering. "But these people, they call me a leader. You talk about sacrifice, but you have no idea what real Sacrifice Island is. It's your team working through the weekend to meet a deadline, not because they have to, but because they believe in what we're building. It's Liam putting a second mortgage on his house in the early days so we could make payroll. That is family. I picked up the folder from the table. This, I said, holding it up, is an insult. And in front of everyone, I tore it in half, then in half again, and let the pieces flutter onto the table. This dinner is over, I declared. And all financial support, all bailouts, everything is over effective immediately. I turned to David. And if I hear so much as a whisper of you trying to smear me or my company, I will use every legal resource at my disposal to show you what consequences truly look like. He shrank back for the first time in his life, looking genuinely afraid. Finally, I looked at my parents. I have spent my entire life trying to earn your approval. Tonight, I realized I never needed it. I already had it right here. I gestured to my team. Then I turned to Liam. "Where's the real party?" he smiled. "Waiting for us, boss." "Then let's go," I said. I walked away from the table, and like a tide, my 200 employees parted to let me through, then flowed into a powerful stream behind me, following me out of the room. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I could feel the dead, shocked silence we left in our wake. We left my parents, my brother, and their guests sitting there among the wreckage of their plans, utterly outmaneuvered and utterly alone. As we stepped out of the restaurant and into the cool night air for the first time in my life, I felt completely and totally free. The party at the event space was a pure emotional release. It was no longer a celebration of an award. It was a celebration of liberation. As we walked in, the entire room erupted in applause and cheers. People surrounded me not as a boss, but as a friend who had just fought a battle and won. They gave me hugs, shared stories, and for the first time in weeks, I laughed a real, unburdened laugh. Later that night, I stood on a small stage, looking out at the sea of people who had stood up for me. "I've always said that Innovate Forward is more than a workplace," I said into the microphone, my voice thick with emotion. "Tonight you proved it. You are my family. Thank you." The room roared again, and in that moment I knew I had made the right decision. The next morning, the fallout began. My first act was to call my lawyer, Sarah. I authorized her to send a formal cease and desist letter to my parents and brother, stating that any further financial demands or threats would be met with legal action. The letter also formalized that I was no longer responsible for any of their debts. It was a clean break, a legal wall I built to protect my newfound peace. Then I changed my phone number. I only gave the new one to a select few. The act of severing that digital cord felt like severing a chain I had been dragging for years. The first few days were strange. I kept subconsciously checking my phone, expecting a demanding call or a guilt-tripping text. But there was nothing, just silence. And in that silence, I found a sense of calm I had forgotten existed. I woke up in the mornings without a feeling of dread about my family's next financial crisis. I could focus entirely on my work, on my team, on my future. The freedom was intoxicating. It was as if I'd been carrying a heavy backpack full of rocks for years without realizing it, and now it was gone. My shoulders were lighter. My breath was deeper. I heard news of my family through the grapevine from my Aunt Carol, who called a week later not to apologize but to pry. She reported that my parents were devastated and humiliated. David was livid, blaming me for all his problems. Apparently, no one saw their own actions as the cause. In their story, I was still the villain. About 2 weeks after the dinner, I received an email from my mother to my work address. She had found a way around my wall. The email was a tangled mess of anger, self-pity, and clumsy attempts at manipulation. "How could you do this to us after all we've done for you?" it began. "Your father can't sleep. David is talking about leaving town. You've destroyed this family, Elena." I read the email and surprisingly I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even a flicker of guilt. Her words had no power over me anymore. They were just echoes from a life I had already left behind. I didn't reply. Instead, I created a filter to automatically move all emails from her and other family members into a separate folder. I wouldn't delete them, but I wouldn't read them either. Rebuilding my life wasn't about leaving. It was about staying where I belonged. For me, that was Innovate Forward. I started a new mentorship program within the company, taking personal time to guide young employees. I started going home at a reasonable hour. I started enjoying the fruits of my labor without guilt. I was free from the burden of their expectations, and for the first time I could begin to define success on my own terms. I was free, but I knew the road ahead was still long. Would they ever understand? Would time heal this wound or only deepen it? The answer would come in a way I could never have predicted. 10 months felt like a lifetime. Or maybe for the first time, it just felt like my lifetime. The constant, low-grade hum of anxiety that had been the soundtrack to my existence for 2 decades had finally faded, replaced by a quiet confidence I was still getting used to. The shift wasn't just internal. It was visible in every corner of my new life. I had sold my suburban house, the one I'd bought with the subconscious goal of being close enough to my parents for their convenience. In its place, I bought a sprawling open-plan loft in the city's revitalized warehouse district. It was a space of steel, reclaimed wood, and massive windows that flooded the rooms with light. It had no guest room I was expected to keep ready, no formal dining room for obligatory holiday dinners. It was a space designed for one person to think, create, and breathe. My first night there, I sat on the polished concrete floor surrounded by unpacked boxes and just listened to the silence. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. That newfound clarity permeated everything. At Innovate Forward, the energy was electric. The story of what happened at the Oak Room had become the stuff of company legend. A modern-day folktale that bonded us in a way no team-building exercise ever could. It wasn't just about the money, though. The $500,000 bonus pool had certainly been a welcome shock to everyone. It was about the principle. The team knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that their CEO had their back, and in turn, their loyalty became my impenetrable shield. We funneled that energy into our work. The Nexus Suite launched to critical acclaim and record-breaking sales. It was a product born from passion and fueled by a sense of shared victory. I saw the change in my own leadership. I was more decisive, more present. I no longer carried the mental weight of my family's next crisis into every board meeting. I was fully, completely the CEO of my company, and we were thriving because of it. But the most meaningful change came from a project born from that prize money. I had carved out a portion of the company's new profits to launch the Innovate for Good Foundation. Our first initiative was a mentorship program for girls from low-income neighborhoods, teaching them how to code and helping them map a path into the tech industry. I remember meeting one of them, a brilliant, shy one, 6-year-old, named Maya. She reminded me so much of myself at that age, full of ideas but constrained by her circumstances. During one of our sessions, she looked at me with wide, serious eyes and said, "No one's ever told me my ideas were worth anything before." In that moment, watching the spark of possibility ignite in her, I felt a sense of purpose so profound it eclipsed any award or valuation. I was finally using my success not to fill the holes in my family's past, but to build bridges to the future for others. The justice for my family, when it came, wasn't vengeful or dramatic. It was the quiet, inevitable consequence of reality. Without my financial drip, their carefully constructed world collapsed. The first domino to fall was the house I grew up in. It was too big, too expensive, and leveraged to the hilt with loans they'd taken out against its value over the years. They sold it at a loss and moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, a place with thin walls and a view of a parking lot. My Aunt Carol described it to me with a kind of morbid fascination how my mother's prized antique furniture looked comically oversized and out of place in the small living room. David's downfall was even more predictable. The restaurant franchise idea vanished, along with any other get-rich-quick schemes that required capital. Forced to confront his own unemployability, he finally took a commission-based sales job selling enterprise software, an irony so thick I could almost taste it. He lasted 3 months, He couldn't handle the rejection, the need to actually listen to a client's needs, or the simple fact that success had to be earned. After being fired, he descended into a spiral of bitterness, his social media becoming a litany of vague complaints about betrayal and how the world was rigged against the good guys. He was a ghost haunting his own life, unable to see that the bars of his prison were of his own making. For months, that was all I knew. Then about 8 months after the dinner, the unexpected happened. My Aunt Carol called. "Elena, I don't know how to tell you this," she began, her voice a mix of shock and gossip. "Your mother has started seeing a therapist. She goes every Tuesday. Your father is furious, says she's airing the family's dirty laundry to a stranger. But she won't stop." I was speechless. My mother, the matriarch of denial, the woman who believed vulnerability was a terminal disease, was actively seeking help. It was the last thing I ever expected. It was also the first sign that something real might be shifting. 2 more months passed. Then a single handwritten letter arrived forwarded from my office. The handwriting was my mother's, but it was shaky, hesitant. It was nothing like the angry, entitled email she had sent before. This was something else entirely. With trembling hands, I opened it. "My dearest Elena, I don't know if you will even read this. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away. My therapist, yes, I have one now, says that making amends begins with making a fearless inventory. It's a terrifying phrase, and I now know why. For months, I have been taking stock of my life, of the choices I have made. And the truth, the horrible, undeniable truth, is that I failed you. I was so consumed by the ghost of David's failure, by the shame of it, that I turned you into a tool to fix it. I didn't see your success. I saw a solution. I didn't see your sacrifices. I saw an obligation. The night at the restaurant, when I called you a burden, I was looking at my own reflection. I was the one who had burdened you. I can't take back the words. I can't undo the years of making you feel second best. But I want you to know this. I see it now. I see you. I see the incredible woman you have become, not because of us, but in spite of us. I am so terribly, profoundly proud of you. I always was. I was just too much of a coward to admit it when it mattered. I don't ask for forgiveness. I haven't earned it. I just wanted for once to tell you the truth. Love, Mom. I read the letter 3 times, the tears blurring the ink. It wasn't a magic wand. It didn't erase the years of hurt. But it was something I never thought I would receive: an apology without justification. It was accountability. I let the letter sit for weeks. I fought with myself, my old wounds, warring with this new glimmer of hope. Finally, on a gray Sunday afternoon, I made a decision. I drove to their new apartment. Standing outside the flimsy door, my heart hammered against my ribs. This was harder than facing down a room of investors. My mother answered the door. For a moment, she just stared, her eyes filling with a mixture of shock and a hope so fragile it hurt to look at. Then she broke down, sobbing quietly. My father appeared behind her. He looked a decade older, the arrogance gone, replaced by a weary resignation. But when he met my eyes, I saw something new, a sliver of respect. We sat in their cramped living room, the 3 of us, and we talked. Really talked for the first time. There were no accusations, just painful truths. I didn't offer to fix their problems. I didn't write a check, but I offered them something more valuable: a chance. "Our old relationship is over," I said, my voice steady. "It wasn't healthy. If we're going to have a new one, it has to be different. It has to be based on honesty, on respect, and it will be on my terms." My father, the man who had never admitted fault in his life, simply nodded. "Whatever terms you want, Elena. It's a beginning. It's not a neat, happy ending where everyone is miraculously healed. It's the slow, difficult work of rebuilding from the rubble. David is still lost in his own anger, and I don't know if he'll ever find his way back. My relationship with my parents is tentative, marked by monthly dinners at a neutral restaurant where we are learning awkwardly to talk to each other as adults. But the foundation of lies and entitlement is gone. It's been replaced by the hard, uneven ground of truth, and maybe, just maybe, there's a chance for something real to grow in its place. As I sit in my office today, looking out over the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling glass, it's hard to believe that just over a year ago, I felt small and alone in a stuffy dining room. This wall of glass used to feel like a reminder of my isolation, a world I had built but felt alien in. But now it feels different. It isn't a barrier, it's a vantage point. From here, I can see the intricate network of streets, the buildings reaching for the sky, and the people moving with purpose. I see an ecosystem built on connection, collaboration, and a shared sense of mission, all the things I once thought family was supposed to provide. The biggest lesson, the one that has completely reshaped my worldview, wasn't a single revelation, but a slow, painful dawning. For 38 years, I had operated under a faulty definition of family. I believed it was an unshakable destiny, a structure determined by blood and obligation. I believed that familial love was a debt to be repaid, and my role was that of the dutiful creditor. I had confused endurance with loyalty and self-sacrifice with love. That night at the Oak Room, when 200 people who shared none of my DNA left their own party to stand silently at my back, they taught me a lesson my parents never could. They showed me that family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build. It isn't forged from duty but from mutual respect. It isn't maintained by guilt but by a shared gratitude. Family are the people who celebrate your wins without a shred of envy, because your victory is their victory. They are the people who sit with you in the darkness of your failures, not to offer platitudes, but to simply let their presence say, "You are not alone." Family is a chosen team, and I had been lucky enough to build one of the best. The act of standing up to my parents wasn't a moment of spontaneous anger. It was the culmination of 1,000 tiny cuts. It was a necessary act of self-preservation. For years, I had allowed them to define my worth. My value was measured by the size of the next check I wrote, by my willingness to drop my life to solve their inconveniences. When they called me a burden, they weren't just insulting me. They were giving me an unsolicited gift, the gift of clarity. They showed me that in their emotional ledger, I would always be a liability, never a cherished asset. Severing that financial cord was the first step, but the real healing began when I cut the emotional one. I had to learn to decouple my self-worth from their approval. It was an agonizing process, like detoxing from a drug you've been dependent on your entire life. There were days I was racked with guilt nights. I lay awake wondering if I had been too cruel. But then I would walk into my office and I would see Maya, my 6-year-old mentee, explaining a complex piece of code to a senior engineer with newfound confidence. I would sit in a meeting with Liam and he would challenge an idea of mine, not to undermine me, but because he respected me enough to push me to be better. And I would realize that this was healthy validation. This was real respect. Setting boundaries became my new compass. I learned that no is a complete sentence. It isn't a rejection of love. It's an affirmation of self-respect. Establishing those boundaries with my parents, as we slowly, tentatively began to rebuild, has been difficult. My mother still sometimes slips back into the language of guilt, and my father still struggles with not being able to fix everything with a business plan. But now, instead of absorbing their dysfunction, I can see it for what it is, their fear and their insecurity, not mine. I can say I love you, but I'm not going to have this conversation and then hang up, not with anger, but with a quiet, solid sense of peace. With David, the lesson was even more complex. I have learned that you cannot save someone who does not want to be saved. My love for my brother could not fill the void inside him, the one that fueled his jealousy and resentment. I spent years trying to clean up the wreckage he left in his wake. I now realize that allowing him to face the consequences of his own choices is not cruel. It is the only form of respect I have left to give. I hope he finds his way someday, but I have accepted that his path is not mine to pave. And perhaps the most profound lesson of all has been about forgiveness. I used to think forgiveness meant erasing the past, saying, "It's okay." I know now that's not it. Forgiveness isn't about absolving them of their responsibility. It's about absolving myself of the burden of my own anger. I can forgive my parents for being products of their own generation and circumstances, while still holding firm to the boundaries that protect me from those behaviors. I can forgive David for his weakness, without ever allowing that weakness to harm me again. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about them. It's about me. It's about taking my emotional power back. So I want to ask you, the person who has taken the time to listen to my story, who is your team? Who are the people in your life who have proven not with words but with actions that they have your back? It might be the friend who answered your call at 3 a.m. It might be the coworker who covered for you when you were having a bad day. It might be the neighbor who brought over a hot meal, no questions asked. These are the real families we build for ourselves. Cherish them. Nurture those relationships because they are the foundation on which we build our lives. And if you are in a situation where you feel undervalued, taken for granted, or seen as a burden, please hear this. You are not alone. Your strength is not measured by your capacity to endure. It is measured by your ability to recognize that you deserve more. Drawing a boundary can feel like you are starting a war, but more often than not, it is the first step toward finding peace. Share your story of finding your team in the comments below. The stories of friendship, loyalty, and chosen family are the most powerful ones, and they remind all of us that we are not isolated in our struggles. If my story has resonated with you, please show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing. Every new subscription sends a message that these stories of resilience and self-empowerment matter. And share this video. Share it with a friend who is struggling or a family member who is trying to draw their own lines in the sand. You never know whose story might be the spark that someone else needs. Finally, remember this: you are the architect, the builder, the CEO of your own life. Never hand the blueprints to anyone else. Build something beautiful. Build something strong. Build something that is truly yours. Thank you for listening.